And we know that when people drive, that contributes to congestion, to air pollution, and other quality of life and health issues. And so our goal is to make as readily available as possible options that are lower impact on the environment and that also improve accessibility for each of our residents. Our fourth goal is a financial goal. We want to make sure that no household must spend more than 45% of their income on housing in combination with transportation and energy. While we don't have much to say over housing or energy costs, we know that transportation can be very expensive. And so we want to make sure that affordable options such as biking and walking are there and that they're safe and enjoyable, and that other options like public transit and driving also have an affordability component to them, so that regardless of your income, you are not spending a majority of it on these very basic needs, so that you can save that money for other uses. And finally, the city of Pittsburgh prides itself on being diverse and inclusive, and we want to make sure that our roadway network reflects this. So these 5 goals all wrapped up are what guides the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure's work. We want to make sure that we're providing the physical mobility so that all of our residents can achieve the economic mobility that they deserve. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a quick overview of our project process. All of our projects undergo these 3 major steps. We start with planning, where we talk to communities and we learn about needs and ideas. We move into design, where we check the feasibility of those ideas and figure out how to make them work into the environment where they're proposed. And then we finally, if we're successful with all of that, move to construction, where we bring those ideas to fruition. This project tonight that you're about to learn about started with a number of planning processes. Our Bike Plus plan, which I'll go into in a moment, was one of those documents where we engaged the community through a number of meetings and had hundreds of inputs from residents like you. And this was one of the ideas that came out of it, of something that they'd like to see to make their lives a little bit better. There are other plans that actually specifically identified Brighton Road for improvements, but I'll let my colleague Sean go into those as part of his presentation. Community outreach, which this meeting is a part of, is a component underlying all 3 of these phases, beginning with those plans, which had a lot of community engagement, to specific design meetings like the one tonight, where we want to talk about a proposal and get your feedback on what works and what you might like to see changed. And finally, with construction, making sure that when we go to implement these changes, that you know about it and you're not surprised by someone tearing up your street one day. Not that that's necessarily proposed as part of this project, but we want to make sure that through every step of the process that the community that will be most impacted is on board and aware. Next slide. So the Bike Plus plan, hopefully most of you on this call, I see that most of you ride bikes at least some of the time, know that the city has finally welcomed its first bike master plan in 20 years. This plan, which took a number of years to develop, identifies 120 miles of new or improved bicycle facilities to help build out a complete and connected network. And Brighton Road is just one small piece of that. It also identifies 27 miles of new trails, which are arguably the most comfortable places to ride bikes because they're completely separated from automobile traffic. And it also identifies a number of new policy goals, ranging from maintenance of those trails, making sure that there's better bike parking, and also solidifying that connection between biking and public transportation. If you want to learn more, you can go to DOMI's website. If you just Google DOMI and bike plan, you're sure to find it with a number of detailed maps highlighting all of those 120 plus miles of new or improved roadway facilities. Next slide. And finally, Move Forward PGH. We are so excited, and the reason that you see 6 faces and not just 1 or 2 tonight, to launch the Move Forward Pittsburgh program. So this is a collaboration. This is a City of Pittsburgh initiative to help bring that bike plan to life. All of those recommendations are going to require a lot of community engagement. And so we're relying on support from our partner organizations. So tonight you'll see that we have Ricardo Solis, who has introduced himself from Healthy Ride, the local bike share company. We've got Anna Tang, who is with us from Bike Pittsburgh. Those 2 will act as our moderators. They'll monitor the chat function and help us handle the Q&A tonight. Also on the line, we've got Sean Stevens, who's the project engineer for this project, who I will transfer the presentation onto in a moment to give you more details. We've got Chris Young from our Policy and Communications Office, who's helping with all of the outreach that you see tonight. And we've got Cassandra Leopold, our new Active Transportation Principal Planner. And with that, I'd like to pass along to Sean so that he can give you more information about the specific roadway improvements that have been proposed for Brighton Road.
Thanks, Kim. Again, my name is Sean Stevens. I'm a project engineer for DOMI. So a bit of background on this project and how it came to be. The Allegheny West Neighborhood Rejuvenation Plan initially identified a block of Brighton Road for a road diet to slow traffic, increase safety, and create functional uses of the roadway. And then this corridor was identified in the city's Bike Plus plan as a north-south connector for the bike network. So from two blocks of Brighton Road from Ridge Avenue to North Avenue are a part of this initial phase. And the depiction on the slide shows the current, a cross-section of the current layout with 4 travel lanes. And a little bit more about the existing conditions. Like I said, it's a two-way street with parking from Ridge Avenue to Western, and then continuing north from Western to North Avenue. It is still a two-way street, however, with those 2 travel lanes in each direction with no parking. The lane widths on this block are rather wide, which creates a condition that has been known to increase speeding. And speeding was actually identified in the neighborhood plan as well. The existing bike network here is shown in bright green. There are currently bike lanes along West Ohio Street in Allegheny Commons Park and the cycle track around Allegheny Circle. So what we are proposing is restriping these 2 blocks of Brighton Road, reducing travel lanes from 4 to 2, as well as adding to the bike network. This project is part road diet for 1 block between North Avenue and Western. And then again, a road diet is to slow traffic, increase safety, and provide more room for other functions along the corridor. And these other functions that we are proposing is adding parking between Western and North and installing bike facilities. We're proposing a parking protected bike lane on the Western residential and business side here, and then a buffered bike lane on the other side of the roadway fronting the park here. This would connect to the existing bike network that we're trying to expand on. And it's as shown with the bike lanes through the park and Allegheny Circle. And this would provide safer access to the park and the business district along Western Avenue. So a little bit about parking protected bike lanes before we dive into the plans, as these facilities are rather new to the city of Pittsburgh. They are one of the safer forms of bike lanes for cyclists and are low cost and rather durable. There are 2 renderings on the right-hand side showing how they work. So from the edge of curb, you have the bike lane itself, a painted buffer, which is the hashed out area, otherwise known as the door zone, so that people can enter and exit a parked vehicle, and then the parking lane. And some of the benefits of a parking protected bike facility is dedicated protected space for cyclists in order to improve comfort and safety. It eliminates the risk and fear of collisions with vehicles. It also reduces the risk of dooring compared to a standard bike lane. And dooring is when drivers open their car door without looking, and an unsuspecting approaching bicyclist doesn't have enough time to react, striking the door, injuring themselves, and potentially injuring the driver exiting their car. Further, these facilities prevent double parking in a bike lane. They have a rather low implementation cost by installing new pavement markings and making use of the existing pavement. And it is more attractive for cyclists of all levels, ages, and ability, which is something that we are trying to promote with the Bike Plus plan. And this being near the park is an added advantage.
Thank you so much for that, Sean. I'm just gonna take a quick break to let everybody know that if you just joined this meeting, and if you're new to Zoom, just know that you'll have some options at the bottom of your screen. You'll have the chat option on your left. Feel free to add any comments. I see some people already adding some comments to that. And if you have questions, please use the Q&A section. I would like to go ahead and share the survey. Your input is really important. So if you look at the chat, you'll be able to click on the link to the survey. So feel free to do that as well. And I'm gonna go ahead and share a second poll for the night. So I'm just gonna launch that for you. You'll see those 2 questions. Feel free to answer them at some point. And yeah, thank you so much to the new people that just joined the meeting.
So moving forward, I'm going to start discussing the preliminary layout for the project. I know that these can be hard to view in a video call format like this, so please bear with me while we walk through it. We're going to start at Brighton Road and Ridge Avenue near, excuse me, the Community College of Allegheny County, CCAC, and then work our way north. So the travel lane configuration would remain the same as today, with this added buffered bike lane on the eastern park side here that is shown. And then the parking between Ridge and Lincoln on the western residential side here would be maintained with the installation of the parking protected bike facility shown here in the hatched out area. And again, the light blue represent, excuse me, the line shown in blue represents the parking that will remain in between Lincoln and Ridge. So up to the intersection with Western Avenue, the travel lane configuration still remains the same as today with the buffered, and then the new facilities would be the buffered bike lane that continues on the eastern park side here, and then parking between Lincoln and Western on this residential side is still maintained with the installation of a parking protected bike lane. Again, this is represented by the large blue line here. And then after crossing the intersection with Western Avenue, this is where the road diet would begin. Travel lanes are reduced to 1 lane in each direction to slow traffic and increase safety, with additional parking being added between Western and Beach with this parking protected facility. And those are represented again with the yellow-orange lines here and here. And then the final sheet showing the intersection of North Avenue and Brighton Road. The park side bike lane ends with a mixing zone to shift cyclists to the left side of the right turn only lane. And this mixing zone is painted in green to provide additional warning, and appropriate signage would also be installed. And then we have a bike box to facilitate left turns onto North Avenue. So this is a 2-stage left. Cyclists would approach the intersection with North along Brighton, use the signal to enter the bike box here, and then wait for the green light to continue on, or to turn onto North Avenue going westerly. And then for users approaching North Avenue going southbound on Brighton, the lanes would be adjusted a bit to reduce any awkward lane shift through the intersection. So we have a proposed double dash yellow extension, which is shown here through the intersection, that would provide directional cues. And then further bollards or flex posts would be installed just at the beginning here of the bike lane, so that this is a vertical element that provides extra warning and directional cues for drivers and cyclists alike. And then a little bit of background data of how to support these decisions. The crash history using PennDOT's Pennsylvania Crash Information Tool, there were 24 reported crashes between 2013 and 2018. 50% of these resulted in injuries, including one of which involved a pedestrian. I'd like to note that some accidents do go unreported, and further, these figures don't include near misses or close calls, and those values are particularly hard to accumulate and generate and know how many of those types of incidents occur. A traffic study based off of PennDOT data, the annual average daily traffic, or ADT, on this corridor is nearly 4,000 vehicles per day. This is in both directions, so approximately 2,000 vehicles per day each way. And based on this volume, this corridor is a good candidate for a road diet without affecting efficiency. Per Federal Highway Administration guidance, a road diet can be implemented on roads with an ADT up to 20,000 vehicles per day. And then a little bit to expand on the parking. Right now, there are approximately 32 legal parking spaces along this corridor between Ridge and Western. Now, a large majority is pay parking. However, there is one section of residential permit area parking. Based on the current design, several of those permit spots would remain. And then this design provides approximately 15 parking spaces in total. And I'd also like to note that within 300 feet of the intersection between Western, West Ohio, and Brighton, there are approximately 51 parking spaces that would be available. And this stretches into the park along West Ohio Street as well as Western Avenue. And based off of several field views along the corridor, parking utilization is currently less than 8%. However, looking at an initial review of historical data gathered from the Pittsburgh Parking Authority, the parking utilization in 2018 for periods of pay parking was approximately 14%. Now, I would like to mention we're still working on obtaining more data in 2019, as well as determining usage during events.
Hi, Sean.
And then the rendering on the slide. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to, I thought you were done. We have one question about the crash statistics. Were they just from these 2 blocks of Brighton, or was it for the whole corridor?
It's for the whole corridor between North and Ridge.
Thank
you. Yeah. And then the rendering on the slide shows what the typical cross-section of the proposed layout is looking north. So this shows the protected bike lane here on the park side with a buffer. And then you have the travel lanes in each direction, the parking lane with the parking protected bike lane here with another buffer. And so with that, I think we're ready to answer some questions. I thank everyone for joining. And so please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section of Zoom.
We have another question about the parking being 14%. They're wondering how that was calculated.
Yeah, so the University of Pittsburgh runs the Western PA Regional Data Center, which aggregates a lot of data for a number of different places. And one of those places is the Pittsburgh Parking Authority. So all of the data is available online. 2019 is currently not available, and I'm working on obtaining that. But from an initial review of 2018 data, I downloaded all of that data, looked at the usage of paid parking for a whole year, and the values work out to be a utilization rate of 14%. There's like a whole mathematical formula involved that if you're very interested, I can go into more detail with, but I prefer to show, I would need to be able to show a little bit more about that. It's a little complicated.
Someone is wondering if you can share the parking data.
Yeah, I can send you a link to the place where you can download all of the data that's available.
Okay. We just got, Chris says, Absolutely love this plan. I'm wondering though about the crosswalks. Will the bump outs be ADA accessible and incorporated into the crosswalks so that pedestrians can wait at the bump outs for the light to turn? It would be safer for pedestrians if the walk across the street was as short as possible.
So we're not proposing any additional curb extensions that would be that would move the ramp or shorten the crosswalk at all. So all of the existing crosswalks will remain the same, as well as the location of the ADA ramps.
Allison says, a lot of cyclists use Beach both ways, avoiding the traffic on Western to get from West Ohio. With this lane, it will be tricky to make a left onto West Ohio from Brighton and to get to Beach from the far side of Brighton after turning off of West Ohio. This would be similar to the difficulty of making the left from Cedar to East Ohio when going north. One thing I think could alleviate the stress of this experience would be to encourage more cars to use west north between Brighton and Allegheny in lieu of Western. Then we could use Western instead of Beach. Do you have any thoughts on this? Do you have ways of predicting how cars will react to these changes?
That's a great, some great feedback on how cyclists use this corridor, and that's something we can take a look at. Exactly why we do these meetings is to gather that sort of feedback. So we'll definitely take a look about cyclists exiting Beach Avenue onto Brighton and how they could make that movement going north onto Brighton. Predicting the way drivers will react is pretty difficult, so I can't really speak to that at this time.
Nick says, when will intersection treatments at West Ohio be designed? There's currently no way to make left turns.
Yeah, this was something I have actually thought about, and maybe the need to install a bike box here to facilitate left turns onto West Ohio Street. And so that's something that we could definitely add to this layout and plan for sure.
Douglas says, as owner of a residential property at 705 Brighton Road, this change would have a significant impact to this property and the residents at this location. The Brighton extension from Western to Ridge is a dead end for bikers. How would this improve their experience?
So this is building on the existing network, connecting to the bike lanes on West Ohio Street, and hopefully would also provide better access for students going to CCAC. So that's the primary reason, one of the reasons for this.
Doug says, I find the parking information not consistent with my personal observations. A formal parking study should be completed during normal business periods when CCAC is active and normal business activities resume. That was just a comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just to address that. We are actively working on obtaining more historical data and looking at usage during times of events and during normal operation. So that is something we are currently working
on. Stephen said a similar comment that parking usage is a function of many things. Parking is driven by time of day, events, and weather, and you need to explain better.
So again, the utilization rate was determined for that 14% figure that I quoted was for times in 2018, and it's only during paid parking periods, which I granted is a one part and time of the day, but we have to start somewhere. So we're working with the information that we have, and we're working on obtaining more.
John has a question. He says, of the 15 proposed parking spaces to remain, How many will be available for parking by the occupants of the 17 residences on these 2 blocks of Brighton? And how many will be metered parking?
So currently, as it stands, the only residential permit parking is between Lincoln and Ridge. So that would most likely be maintained as residential permit parking. That is the plan. And then the parking between Western and Lincoln right now, that's what's shown in blue. That is currently pay parking. And so we've yet to really arrive at if we'll maintain all of pay parking, if there's such a demand for residential permit parking. I do know that there is permit parking along North Lincoln, but there is one block between the alleyway, I think is called Roy Place. I might be misspeaking here, but there's an alleyway that's just off of Brighton. That section is not residential permit parking right now, but we could change that and have that be residential permit parking so that there would be more spaces provided for folks.
Doug would like to know if this study involved CCAC and how many of their students actually bike to this campus.
Kim, do you have any insight on CCAC and their?
Unfortunately, we don't have that data. And of course, right now during COVID, there's a lot of different travel patterns that we are observing. But the hope is that by improving connectivity, that it will become a more viable, safer, and attractive option for those who choose to use it.
Doug also would like to know if, says that CCAC is expanding their campus, and was this factored into your parking estimates?
So CCAC, from my count that I did myself, has upwards of 1,000 parking spaces available on their campus. I don't know what their plans are for expansion, if that's just their Allegheny or their Northside campus, because they do operate a number of campuses within the county. So we would like to know more on that.
Right now there are not any more questions, but if people do have more questions, they can put them into the Q&A.
Also, there's a comment on the chat section that says, please change that orphanage section of North Lincoln and Roadway to permit parking.
Yeah, that's definitely something we can look at and address, because it should be consistent through the street. I'm not sure what the history of that decision is, but it was something that we can take a look at in further detail.
Doug says, how can the study be accurate without involving CCAC and understanding their parking considerations in the future?
I mean, most of this is pay parking, so it's not, CCAC, maybe people use that when they park there to go to CCAC, but
And Sean, can you go over again what the numbers are that we're talking about here? Because if 14% occupancy for the meter data, which I believe is the data that Sean was able to pull from that shared resources that he'll link to, is 14%. So that means that there is excess capacity at all times that data was collected for. While we understand that there might be growth within the area and maybe additional demand for parking in the area, we do believe that there is capacity based on the data that we've been able to receive.
Yeah, so to go over, right now there's approximately 32 legal parking spaces, and that is a mix of pay and residential. 15 spaces are to remain. So again, that it will be a mix of pay and residential permit parking.
Nicholas has a question. He says, will crosswalks be added so that people do not have to walk to North or Western to cross? Volume, speed, and lane configuration of the proposed design all indicate this would be safe.
Is the question, sorry, about North and or Western and Brighton? Is that the area of concern?
Yes.
Okay.
Will crosswalks be added so that people do not have to walk to North or Western to cross? So like to the ends of those two streets, I believe.
That, sorry, Chris here from Domi. That sounds like it's referring to adding a crosswalk at Beach Avenue.
At Beach, okay. I know that that was identified in the neighborhood plan as a desire. However, this is within 300 feet of a signalized intersection. And so having a unsignalized crosswalk that close presents a number of safety concerns, mostly because when it's that close to a signalized intersection, people don't always yield to pedestrians at an unsignalized crosswalk. So it would be safer for folks to cross at a signalized intersection. And that is what we have maintained here.
Nick clarified about it being the non-controlled intersections that there would be crosswalks.
Yeah, so yeah, like I said, it's safer for folks to cross at a signalized intersection given where this cross street is at an unsignalized intersection. So no proposed crosswalks along the beach or at the beach intersection.
There are just a bunch of comments, but there are no more questions that I am seeing.
Okay.
A couple of thank you.
Yeah, that's good.
John, can you put the slide that has the survey link on it one more time?
Yes.
We want to make sure that everybody knows that tonight is not your only opportunity to provide feedback. The survey that we have on our website is another place where you can go in and answer a number of questions about different aspects of this project so that we can make sure. We will definitely take all of the comments and questions that we've received tonight into consideration and see what we can incorporate into the design. But if you have any additional questions moving forward, please check out DOMI's website. Please fill out our survey, and we'll be happy to consider any recommendations that you might have.
I also just added that. I also just added the survey to the chat as well.
There was one more question from Stephen. Would like to know, in the interest of inclusion and diversity, can you describe the racial, age, make of the people working on this?
That's a really interesting question, Stephen. I don't know if you can see our our panel, which happens to be quite diverse from a gender, race, ethnicity, and age perspective, but we do recognize that inclusion is incredibly important. And so we have worked with our Office of Equity on our outreach with the Bike Plus plan. We want to have events that are as accessible as possible, which are pretty difficult right now given COVID concerns. You know, if this was 6 months ago, this event may have been in person. What we found is that from participation in our meetings, we've actually seen a ton of additional participation with our virtual meetings compared to some numbers from meetings that were held in person previously. So we like to think that from a community engagement standpoint, that we are reaching more people, at least by the numbers, than we had previously.
John has a question For the 17 residences on these 2 blocks of Brighton, more than 30 individuals who currently park in both the resident permit and metered spaces, where will they park? Where to unload from their vehicle? Where will service vehicles and deliveries park? And when they have guests visiting, where will they park?
So there's a number of spaces that are being maintained along this corridor and with the adjoining streets. There's parking available along Western, West Ohio, Ridge, and Lincoln. This is a mix-up of permit parking and pay parking. And so there's quite a number of spaces available in the surrounding area.
Robert has a question. Why did Domi add a right turn only sign at the southbound Brighton/Western intersection when these plans will eliminate it?
So I think that was initially added because there was only, if you're looking at the layout here on sheet 2, that I hope everyone can still see, sorry. So right now between Western and North, that we have the 2 travel lanes in each direction. And so since there's a parking lane on the receiving end here through the intersection, this has to be a right turn only lane. Otherwise, if a car were to go straight here and someone was parked, they would obviously run into a parked car, or there would be a conflict through the intersection where 2 competing vehicles are trying to go straight at the same time. So I think to make it clearer for drivers, with the current configuration, the right turn only signage was added to make that clearer for everyone involved to facilitate right turns onto Western.
Robert is wondering, why is it necessary to add any parking on the 900 block of Brighton?
Since we do have a slight reduction in parking, we were trying to maintain as many parking spaces as we could and still have safe bicycling or safe bicycle bike infrastructure, excuse me.
Doug wants to know, 705 Brighton is the last residential property that you are omitting from Lincoln to Ridge. You are keeping residential permit parking and missing this residence. Why?
So I'd like to, I guess, know a little bit more exactly where 705 is. I can't really identify that right now. But Doug, if you'd like to send the feedback, fill out the feedback survey with your email address. And if you would like to discuss this in more detail with me, we could do that. But I would like to have some more information about exactly where you're talking about. I think, is that all the questions, Anna?
Yeah,
Great.
that's it.
Yep, that is it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Other than that, there is a comment from Allison that I guess pretty much saying that as a CCAC student, Allison sees that the bike racks are typically full on decent days, but less busy on colder days. Just a comment.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We really appreciate it. As Kim and Ricardo said, please fill out the feedback survey, and this is the first of meetings to continue. And we're going to take these comments and make some revisions to the layout and still look at your feedback survey comments as well. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and share the result from the polling. But yeah, thank you so much. Everybody have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Enjoy the rest of your day.